Ellie, welcome. So glad you're here.
Thank you, Rabbi Hirsch. I'm so excited to spend time with you. I know that there are a ton of people tuning in, but it feels like I'm at your house. We're like having tea together.
I feel like we've done that for so many years, and I feel like sitting across from you right now is really magical, even though we're 3,000 miles apart. Yeah. So I want to dig right in and jump right to the topic at hand. Krista Tippett on Being, who is a podcast that I love. She starts every podcast the same way with what is your spiritual journey? How did you come to become an expert in meditation and truly find a home for other people to meditate and to give them that wisdom?
Well, I have to say I'm only 35, so I don't really consider myself a meditation expert at this moment in time. I think it takes a lifetime to actually become one of those. But I would say that, as you know, I was born and raised in Los Angeles, and I had a sick mom growing up my whole life, and that obviously had a pretty big impact on my young years and my teenage years, and watching someone you love go through and fight such a tough battle really kind of forces you to get in touch with your own feelings and emotions, maybe earlier than most. And because I was raised in LA in a family in the entertainment business, I kind of always assumed that I was going to end up doing that as a career. And so I went to Northwestern, as you mentioned, for film school, and graduated, moved to New York City. And a couple years after I graduated, I found myself, working like 14, 18-hour days in the film business. And I noticed that I was starting to feel pretty sick. And so in 2008, a couple years later, I had a little bit of a health scare, and it landed me in the office of a functional medicine doctor named Dr. Frank Lippman, who's wonderful. He's based in New York. And I realized that the amount of stress I was carrying in my body was actually making me pretty sick. And if I didn't sort of address that or deal with that, then I might be looking at a future that my mom met. And so I started exploring different modalities of healing. So the doctor was really helping me fix the physical aspects, but he sort of said, there's an emotional piece that's missing. I think you should probably explore that. So I met my breath through this wild practice called ecstatic breath work. It's not something you want to do every day. You don't want to like drive a car after or email. So I needed something that was a little bit more practical for everyday use. And so I started struggling with meditation. And I say struggle because it was really hard to commit to a practice, to have the discipline to do it. And I noticed that there would be a million other things I would want to do other than meditate. And so I thought about what I was really able to be disciplined around. And that was my exercise routine as part of also making my health better. And I thought about how I liked to, how I ended up staying really disciplined around that. And I wanted to build that same structure of accountability around my meditation practice. So I had a place to go. I had teachers I was interested in studying or dancing with. I had like a community of people that kept me motivated. And I really wanted to build that around my meditation practice. I wasn't interested in going to any religious centers because I am Jewish, and I felt like that was enough for me in my life. But I was really interested in developing this tool that had been, proven scientifically worked. And so I wanted to really pursue that. So that's how I ended up starting Mindful. I needed a place to go. And if I, could find that in New York, then maybe 8 million other people could also find that.
So I love that you said that. And I wanted to thank you for sharing a little bit about your journey, because I know, you were a busy and very full of energy teenager and then a young woman. And I think some people think that people that meditate are just people that are super Zen all the time. And I always think if you or I can meditate, which I do as inspired by you, then anybody can. But you touched a little bit about your Judaism. And I want to hear, how has your Judaism influenced your meditation? Or has it, or do they interact with one another? Are they separate? A little bit about that.
Yeah, I would say, to be honest, they're kind of separate. So there's this saying that sort of travels around the meditation community, that prayer is talking to God and meditation is listening. And so they feel like very different practices, to be honest. I think that there's room for both. So I'm a big believer that part of the way we educate ourselves and become familiar with, other cultures, religions, other people, is by inviting everyone to have a seat at the table and really, listening to what they have to say and their wisdom and their perspective. So I feel there's plenty of room for both my practice of Vedic meditation and my Judaism. I will say that I've noticed just an ability to be more present overall. So, when we think about going to services, and maybe we spend that 2 hours in congregation and we're thinking about a million other things, it's a little bit actually like meditating, where you have to bring your focus back. If your mind is wandering, or you think about what you're going to eat, or when, this next prayer is going to be done, or whatever's coming up for you, that is a part of your own mind and your thinking process. It's really influenced my ability to show up and be present for my Judaism in a way that I sort of never expected.
I love that, because there's a Jewish proverb that says, when we pray, we speak to God, but when we study, God speaks to us. So it's very similar to meditating. And actually the Hebrew word to pray is lahitpalel, which is reflexive. And there's a huge tradition of meditation within Judaism. So I love that it's helped you become more present for your Judaism. So some people have been talking to us about the feedback on the sound. We're working on it. If you're just tuning in to Biyachad Together, sponsored by or spirited by American Jewish University, we're delighted you're here. So we're going to do something really adventurous, is that I thought you should lead us in a meditation. And we have over 600 people registered and participating. So take us through. It's about a 10-minute meditation. If you've never meditated before, like many people that are listening, I hope you'll give us the ability to bear with it and teach us how to do it. And then we'll come back together, answer some more questions, and hear from all of you. So go, take us away.
Excellent. So I recommend if everyone could find a comfortable position, whether that's in a chair, whether that's lying down. If you're in a chair, you can keep your legs about hip width apart. If you happen to have a meditation cushion, that's amazing. You can sit in proper posture on that cushion. We're just going to take a moment to really get into the body. And we're only going to be doing this for 10 minutes. So I've got you. We're going to be working with attention and awareness in this brief mindfulness exercise. And let's begin by taking 3 deep breaths together, in through the nose and out through the mouth. And one more time, in through the nose and out through the mouth. And one last time, in through the nose and out through the mouth. And we'll begin by feeling our sits bones on the cushion, or the chair, or the ground. Noticing if the surface you're sitting on is hard or soft. Bringing our attention to our feet, the toes, the balls of the feet, the arches of the feet, the heels. Really identifying all the points of contact where the foot meets the earth. Noticing the lower legs, the shins, the calves, the knees. And then bringing our full attention to the larger muscle groups in our legs, the thighs, hamstrings, noticing if there's any sensation from sitting, walking, movement from your day. Noticing the base of the spine, really the anchor of our seat. And if you're sitting, allowing for the spine's natural curvature all the way up to the shoulders. In this practice, we take a posture that is uplifted, dignified, but not strained in any way. Noticing the shoulders. If it's helpful, you can shrug them up and let them go, just clearing any tension you might be carrying there in our body. Making space. You can bend your arms at a 90-degree angle, if that's helpful. And then rest your palms on your thighs, hands a few inches away from the knees. Or you can fold your hands in your lap. And then taking a moment to feel what it feels like in your body below the neck. Bringing our attention to our head, relaxing the muscles in the face, relaxing the forehead, the cheeks, the jaw, even allowing the jaw to hang open ever so slightly, clearing any tension we may be holding in the teeth. These small but mighty muscles work all day long. They tell other human beings what we're thinking, what we're feeling. So just taking a moment to relax those muscles. You can tuck your chin in ever so slightly so the head finds this perfect point of balance where it meets the neck. And you can set your gaze 2 to 3 feet in front of you, not looking at anything in particular. If you'd like to practice eyes open. Otherwise, if your eyes are open and you'd like to close them, you can go ahead and close them now. And then just taking a moment to feel what it feels like to be this aware of your body. Taking a moment to feel what it feels like to be this held by gravity. And then from this place of embodiment, from this place of groundedness, see if you can connect to where the breath feels most available to you today. Perhaps it's in the rising and falling of the belly, the movement of the chest, or even the subtlest of breezes at the tip of the nose. No need to alter the breath or change it in any way. We just work with its natural cycle. Noticing the in-breath. Noticing the out-breath. And even noticing the space between our breaths. And by now the mind has wandered probably several times over, and that's totally normal and natural. It's a part of this practice. When we become aware that we're no longer focused on our breath, we gently and lovingly and without judgment come back to the breath. There's nowhere else to go, nowhere else to be. But to be with the breath in this moment. If it's helpful, when the mind wanders, you can say thinking, and then come back to the breath. As we near the end of our practice, let's go ahead and take another 3 deep breaths together, in through the nose, and out through the mouth. One more time, in through the nose, and out through the mouth. And one last time, in through the nose, and out through the mouth. And whenever you're ready, and in your own time, you can begin to wiggle your fingers and your toes. Move the body. Slowly raise the gaze. And come back into the room.
Ellie, thank you so much. Even my speech slowed down. Just that moment. If you're just tuning in, you're at B'Yachad Together, spirited by American Jewish University, and we just were taught 10 minutes of how to keep your mind from wandering during this COVID pandemic. So I heard you say when you feel your mind wandering, and many of us right now are slaves to our mind even more so than normal, you said to stay thinking. Tell me why.
Yeah, so one of my very first teachers likes to remind me that the mind involuntarily thinks like the heart involuntarily beats. If our mind wasn't thinking, we might be dead. And I've always actually rather liked that, because it reminds me that if my mind is working and I'm having, somewhere in our description, we talked about 12,000 to, I think it was 80,000 thoughts a day, that means I'm alive. And I'm here and I'm in the present moment. But it also means that I don't have a lot of control over the quality of my thoughts. It's kind of an ongoing rapid fire stream of whatever is in my subconscious with combined with whatever's in front of me. And so long-term meditators, there's a beautiful study that shows long-term meditators show greater connectivity between their prefrontal cortex, which is executive functioning, worrying about the future, worrying about the past, and also the amygdala, which is the fight or flight center of the brain. And when you have a really consistent practice, those two areas of the brain are better able to speak to one another, and you're less likely to get emotionally hijacked. So what we practice is this sort of dialogue between attention and awareness. So giving the breath our full attention. And then when the mind starts again, so meditation, spoiler alert, is not going to turn off your mind. I mean, that's bogus. That's not why we practice. But it does teach us to be more constructive with it. So when that rabbit hole of thoughts start coming and we're thinking about lunch and when this is going to be over, and the fact that there's an echo on my voice because of the technology we're on, and we're all like letting our mind run amok, right? We can notice that that's happening. And then, as if we were telling a child that we love, show ourselves this compassion and this gentleness, to return to the breath. We're not bad meditators. We're not chastising ourselves. And this practice over and over again gives you a lot of choice, starts to flex that muscle of choice between attention and awareness, so that when you're off the cushion, you have more choice in how you want to respond to thoughts that you may be having or people that might be triggering you.
I can't think of something more important to practice right now than this, because the mind is very active, right? We're all sort of alone with our thoughts in our home and having to wrestle with it. And you're talking about really those things, whether it's the echo on this webinar or whatever it is. I know there are many things that are good for me, like meditating. And I don't do them every day. What do you say to people during this time? We always use the excuse, we don't have enough time, we don't have enough time. Now we have time, and I still am not necessarily meditating. How do you get people to start, or even just to stay motivated during this time?
So two things I would say is, one, having a consistent practice really teaches you a lot of self-compassion and forgiveness, which is that we all have a laundry list of things that we think would improve ourselves or make ourselves better or somehow change our life if we did them. And holding ourselves to this impossible standard of all these things isn't actually going to help our relationship with ourselves, right? So even just doing one thing, like taking a deep breath, that's an accomplishment. So I also want to make the distinction between self-optimization and self-care. So self-optimization might look like a paleo or a keto diet, and self-care could look like taking a nap. And one of those things, right, requires a lot of capital and a lot of discipline, and the other is like just maybe making some time on our schedule and is absolutely free. So it's important when we talk about like self-care or self-improvement to understand that like these two things are very different, optimization and self-care. And so if we can learn to really be gentle with ourselves, one of the ways we can care for ourselves is not beating ourselves up if we can't get a meditation practice off the ground. But if you are interested in building one, there are 4 C's I like to remind people of. So the first is commitment. So it requires discipline. Most studies show you need a minimum of 10 minutes a day for 8 to 10 weeks to see the benefits. And so that 8 to 10 weeks is really about consistency. So that's the next C. So your practice has to be consistent if you want to see the benefits, which are cumulative. That's the third C, because those benefits build over time. The best incentive to keep practicing is to watch what happens when you introduce meditation into your life and you see the change it brings. And then, of course, that last C is choice. So especially when you're practicing mindfulness meditation, you're choosing, right, between, I mentioned this earlier, between your attention and that rabbit hole of thoughts. And that flexing that muscle of choice on the cushion is like going to the gym and flexing your bicep. It gets stronger every time you do it. So you're able to have more choice in your everyday life. And so when you're having those negative thoughts, or when you feel like you can't get out of a thought cycle, you can say to yourself, wow, like my mind is really powerful. I'm having a lot of self-compassion for myself. I know that this is not permanent, and these thoughts will pass. And so it allows you to sort of be in that moment with those difficult thoughts and feel them more deeply, without trying to dampen them or run away from them or not deal with them, or again, be unkind to yourself because you're having them. It's natural that we have those thoughts. I think you're still on mute. There you are.
Sorry about that. I just lost you for a second. I think the whole world on Sunday night is trying to tune in and either on their computer or they're meditating with us. But I really loved what you said about the difference between self-care and, is it 4 C's or 5 C's?
4 C's. So commitment, consistency, cumulative, and choice.
I love that.
I mean, we could add a 5th and call it change if we're really like getting into alliteration, but we don't have to do that.
Right. I think that's one of the challenges is like finding that commitment, especially now, because I hear a lot of people saying it's just hard to get out of bed in the morning.
Yeah.
And so what advice do you have for people to encourage them to get out of the bed? And also people are having a lot of trouble sleeping. Do you have any sort of advice in that area? Getting up and going to sleep.
Yeah, so I would say in terms of getting up, I would really, something that might be helpful to help you get out of bed is like to really consider what you're grateful for that day, and use that as a tool to help you get out of bed, whether you're grateful for your family members that are safe and healthy right now. And so we get out of bed to honor them, or, you get out of bed because you have 2 working legs, and you're able-bodied. That's reason enough to get out of bed, right? You live in a body that allows you to even get out of bed in the first place. So that should feel inspiring to you in the morning. There are many different reasons, like what do we wake up for? What do we get out of bed for? And then I think it's also okay to like sit in those feelings of like, oh, it's really hard to get out of bed right now. And like, I'm just gonna allow myself to feel that for like the next 10, 20 minutes. And I'll get out of bed in 20 minutes when I'm done feeling like it's difficult to get out of bed, and just show yourself this like love and compassion if you can. I mean, obviously if you have children that like need to be fed, that's a different story, or people that rely on you in your home. But if you are able to spend that extra time just kind of allowing yourself to really feel all those things, that can be really helpful. And then in terms of going to sleep, there's so many different beautiful practices and techniques to help with sleep. One of my favorites is that when you're lying, you can lay down. If anyone's ever tried yoga or has lain in Shavasana, that's a beautiful position, palms turned up, to lay in your bed. And I would just bring your attention to each body part and do a full body scan. So you would like start with your lips, then you go to your nose, then you go to your eyes, and like get really specific, like your hair, your ears, and just use the tool of your body to help create a little bit of relaxation. Another technique I'll just say is if you can identify where the stress is that you're holding in your body. So let's say it's in your chest or in your belly, just placing your attention there and giving your belly your full attention. And then when your mind wanders, you come back to your belly. And then once that begins to subside, you move to like a different place where you're holding your stress. So maybe then it's the chest or the throat. I found that to be really, really helpful in terms of sleep technique.
It's so Jewish what you're talking about. And I always say that to you and you always laugh, but it's, we have this custom. We get up every morning and we say these brachot. Before we put food in our mouth, we say a blessing to become conscious, to become present in that moment. And what you're talking about is really taking that moment to be here now and not getting ahead of ourselves and not getting behind ourselves. And it's especially difficult right now. What I want to do is I want to turn to some questions from our listeners, because I know there are a lot of them coming in. Again, we're at American Jewish University, and I'm delighted that Ellie Burrows, the founder of Mindful in New York, is here with us, sharing her wisdom, sharing her meditation techniques, and her Judaism. So I have some very tactical questions and some more thoughtful questions. So first of all, what is a meditation cushion?
A meditation cushion. So
And where do you get one?
So there's lots of places you can get them. Ours at Mindful are made by a company called Samaya, Samaya. And they are like a little cushion that goes on the floor. They have some traditional names. The traditional names are Zafu and Zabutan, if we're getting real tactical, as you say. And they rest on the floor and they help.
They sound like two characters from a Disney movie.
Right. They help you with proper posture when you're sitting. You can also get this thing that I love called a back jack, which is like a chair that sits on the floor. I went to Jewish summer camp and we used to have crazy creaks. So they're not exactly a crazy creak chair, but they are this chair that you can get them on Amazon, and they allow for back support. But then again, really understanding like what your body needs. So some bodies require sitting in a chair because you've had back surgery or hip surgery, or it really depends on what you're able to do with your body. So, so having a meditation teacher or watching some really helpful posture videos might be helpful based on the body that you operate in.
Yeah, I love that. Tell me, we hear a lot about chakras and energy. Tell me, what is your understanding of Judaism's view on chakras and energy? And
it's actually really interesting because I think the place where there's the most crossover is actually in the Tree of Life in Kabbalah. So these different energy centers that I've seen actually superimposed on images of bodies to show like how we embody the Tree of Life. And obviously you're the expert and you're the rabbi, but to me, that's where there's the biggest crossover. So if we're defining what chakras are, they're energy centers in the body. They come out of the Vedas, which is some people say 10,000-year-old body of knowledge out of India. I believe there's 7 of them, starting with the root all the way up to the crown. And they're different energy centers in the body that we can hold certain energetic blocks in. So when I also think about Judaism on the other side, when I've seen like the chakra system imposed on the Tree of Life from Kabbalah, to me, that's where they intersect with those energy centers around, Chesed and Gevurah or something like that. Rabbi, why don't you take it away?
I was going to say Hesed is kindness and Gevurah is strength, judgment. But what I was going to say, which is so beautiful, is the Torah, our way of life, not just the Torah, the 2 scrolls, but Torah, the way of life, is referred to as the Tree of Life. And so it's really like tapping into that energy that allows you to live really meaningfully and purposefully. And I love that the intersection of the way you describe them. And it's so funny because you describe them as Judaism here and meditation here, but I hear them very intertwined in your own life.
I mean, even using the word tree, right? So in the English translation of, the first chakra, it's root chakra. That's roots, trees. And there's some interesting teachers, some crossover. I've heard Vedic meditation teachers in discussion with rabbis, and we talk about, how closely certain words are, like something like Brahman and Abraham. And so when we think about like the translation of words like that somewhere along the way, maybe language wasn't as diverse as it is now. And so certain concepts might have traveled somewhere and changed slightly, and depending on where it was in the world, and evolved differently. So I often think about that. And like where are these points of intersection? Yeah.
Right. For sure, these religions and way of lives did not evolve in a vacuum. There's an entire study called intellectual history that's really about how the society at the time influences the culture as it's being created. So in no question, all these roots and these words that appear in the rabbinic tradition, Greek roots and Greek words, are very much intertwined in the culture that they're living in at the time. So another question that came in, which I think is really powerful, is can meditation be used to deal with unresolved anger?
Yes, it can. That's the short answer. So we offer a class, for example, at Mindful called Mindful Emotions, which is working with the strong emotions that we feel. So strong emotions are thoughts with a ton of energy behind them. And so we can often hold those things in our body. And so sometimes we walk people through a sensory practice of what it feels like to actually be in that emotion and feel that emotion, and then what it feels like to not feel it. And different teachers will lead that class in different ways, but really allowing ourselves to feel the sensation, to become familiar with the sensation, and to work with it again in a more constructive way. There are tons of practices that can help. with unresolved anger. And meditation just really is something. So one of the Tibetan words is gom, which means to become familiar with. So meditation helps us become familiar with all of who we are. So if we know that we have unresolved anger, that's like step one, right? So we know that it's there to deal with. And then really figuring out what practice might be helpful for that. And there's different techniques. It depends on what the source of the anger is also, right? So we can practice, like if it's about, let's say it's about someone else, someone harming us, or a relationship, like what are we angry about? We can practice something like loving kindness, which is cultivating more love for ourselves, for other people, for difficult people, for society at large, and really strengthening that love muscle, which is a great antidote to that anger muscle. So it's totally normal to have unresolved anger, and meditation can definitely help us be more okay with having it, and then also working through it.
Well, and I like also that you understand that it's a muscle, and like a muscle has to get practiced again and again. And I think during this time when we're alone with our thoughts and we have so much time to think about relationships and what's important in our life and what's not important in a way that we don't customarily have, some things that come up may not be some feelings that we wanted to acknowledge. Maybe we've tucked them away. And sometimes I think that's what's hard about meditation, is that these feelings come out. But I hear you talking a lot about not judging ourselves and really finding compassion for ourselves and for others.
Yeah, and another way of thinking about it is like allowing the physiology to relax enough so you can even meet your anger in the first place, right? Because things are going to come up regardless, but getting really comfortable with the idea that it's okay to feel anger. It might never get resolved, but meditation can certainly help you work with that sort of without having closure or resolution around it in a really helpful way, in a really loving way.
I love that, because I think that's a very Jewish also concept. It's like, it's not about getting it all worked out, wrapping it up in a big bow and everything being hunky-dory, right? It's not that every year we come to Yom Kippur and by the end of the 10 days of tshuva, we're all done, right? Or that through the 8 days of Passover, we're like, we're freed from bondage, no more slave to the feelings we have. It's sort of that you're continually reminding yourself that you're willing to engage in the process.
Yeah.
So before we close out, and I'm going to have you take us out with one more meditation, what's the most important discovery or something that you've learned about yourself, about the world, about your Judaism through meditation?
Oh, wow. It's such a big question.
Yeah. Standing on one foot, as they say.
That's a super big question. I would say meditation has really taught me to be okay with so many different difficult scenarios or things that I'm feeling, or things that happen in the world. You know, it's actually funny because, you know, I used to be someone who said, oh, everything happens for a reason. And it's not that I judge people that say everything happens for a reason, but I'm not sure that it necessarily does. Like, some really horrible things happen in the world. I have no idea why they happen, and they definitely don't happen for a reason that I can identify. And so to really like understand that there is so much pain and violence and suffering in the world, and that part of what meditation has allowed me to do is figure out how I want to be in service of alleviating some of that in some capacity, right? So whether it's introducing people to sitting with their own hearts and their own minds and coming to mindful, or making meditation accessible through free classes on Instagram Live right now, or whatever we're doing, that it's a fact. It's made me accept a lot of the you know, trauma and sadness and suffering in the world, and also how to like meet that in a way that is maybe just going to move the needle forward that much more towards kindness and compassion. So, you know, I know I can't fix all of it, but I can certainly fix, you know, or try to help serve what is in my immediate vicinity, and just being really honest and transparent about what state I'm in, what the state the world is in, and not try to run away from that. That's probably the biggest thing by far.
I love that you shared that, because this idea that everything happens for a reason is really a big nut to swallow. And I too don't agree with it, because this virus isn't to take out the world, but how we how we respond, the choices we make to alleviate the sufferings of others, how we look at this moment and how we act in this moment is really what meditation is here to do. And it's actually what we're meant to do as Jews, is to make the world better. And that's what we're here to do. So for those of you that have tuned in, I first want to thank you so much, Ellie. I know you're going to close out with a meditation. I also want to remind everybody that we're in the middle days of the holiday of Passover, and on Friday morning at 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 p.m. Eastern, we will be making challah, breaking bad bread, with Beth Rincanti, the author of Braided, and Elisa Klein, the founder or the CEO of One Table, really to break bread together. You can order in pizza, or you can get your dough together and we'll be making bread together. But tomorrow night, I want to remind people that we have Praying Without the Prayer Book, which really is about meditation. It's another form of prayer when we really speak to God and not using the prayer book to limit you. And that's by our own Rabbi Morris. So I'm hoping that you'll all tune in for that tomorrow night at aju.edu, B'yachad together. Don't forget to register. So will you take us out with one final 2-minute meditation?
So everyone wants to find their seat again. We won't do a whole body scan, just close the eyes. And we talked about what it feels like to wake up in the morning and feel gratitude for something. But we can also practice gratitude before we go to sleep, when we're ending our day. So just taking a moment to bring to mind something we're grateful for. No need to search for what that is. The first thing that comes to mind is perfect. And once that image, that person, that thing has crystallized in your mind's eye, noticing where you feel gratitude in your physical body. Can you bring your full attention to where you physically feel gratitude? Maybe just taking your hand and placing it there. It's your heart or your belly, even your legs. Just being with that sensation. Maybe even turning the corners of your mouth up in a smile, which tells our brain that we're feeling something good, something yummy. Then allowing the hand to rest back down in the lap. And then just taking one full deep breath together in through the nose and out through the mouth. And then just come back.
We are so grateful to you, to what you've brought into the world, and to Mindful. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you to all. We look forward to learning with you, meditating with you, praying with you, singing, even speaking Hebrew together on B'yachad together. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you,
Thank
everyone
you,
who
Ellie.
joined.